blank check public company, which began trading on the New York Stock Exchange in September. Maybe you can give us some hints about what that SPAC wants to buy. Chamath is also the part owner of the Golden State Warriors, and we're thrilled to have him here. Travels with an entourage. I know we have a whole team of people here this morning. Hi over there.
It takes a village.
Takes a village.
He's got a wardrobe consultant.
He's got
obviously. Because is that from the Sorkin collection?
This is from the Sweater of the Month Club, as you correctly pointed out.
Oh, look at that.
Bingo.
Andrew, what about
what's
backing from Chamath for a Sorkin sweater?
I thought about. What do you think?
A sweater of the month?
Like a trunk club situation.
I think it's a great accessory, underused.
No, but look, we have the graphics ready to go. So we're thinking of selling a sweater every month.
I love it.
We'll just send it out in a box.
I would buy it.
What would you pay?
Anywhere between $50 and $500.
50 and 500.
I mean, it depends on the build quality.
Yeah, we only accept Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we got a lot to talk about and unpack, as people like to say in the news business. Talking about this, I want to talk Bitcoin, and then we should probably first start with this, though, because you made a lot of headlines, or at least I know you made this comment just a couple of weeks ago, but it seems to have gone viral now.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I've heard it. It's viral.
No, but it just appeared in some of the blogs and other things in the past couple of days. You made some truly critical comments about Facebook really upending children and our society, and
let me set the context. So the context was I was at Stanford, and the dean asked me to speak to the MBA students, and in it, what I was talking about was the question was, what do you think the long-term effects of social media in general are? And unfortunately, what happened was, I think it's easy to characterize what I said just as a Facebook-specific thing, because I worked there and I was a key part of growing it. The reality of what I was...
Explain what you said at the time.
So what I said was, I think the tools that have been created today are starting to erode the social fabric of how society works. And what I meant by that is the following thing. Today, we live in a world now where it is easy to confuse truth and popularity. And you can use money to amplify whatever you believe and get people to believe that what is popular is now truthful and what is not popular may not be truthful. Joe and I, for example, we've been on the other side of climate for a long time, right? And the reality is now I can take money and I can use that through all of these social media systems that exist to hundreds of millions of people, and I can convince all of Joe's friends and everybody like him of my opinion in very subtle and small ways. And he can do the same to me. We can do that about vaccines. We can do that about gay rights. We can do that about bathroom laws. We can do that about Roy Moore. And so I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we live in a world where this is now possible? And
so it was about that, but just so I understand, was it because I read and watched parts of what you were talking about. Part of it seemed to me about the ability to pay to manipulate people's thoughts. The other seemed to me to be this sort of ADD society with which this sort of liking and everything else has created this sort of feedback loop that you compared to drugs.
We know for a fact that what all of these systems do, every single one, is it exploits our own natural tendencies in human beings to get and want feedback. And that feedback, chemically speaking, is the release of dopamine in your brain. And so what these feedback loops do, and they exist everywhere, in Call of Duty, in other video games, in social networking sites, they get you to react. And I think that if you get too desensitized and you need it over and over and over again, then you become actually detached from the world in which you live.
You become callous, you become crude.
And you live in front of your screen.
But Chamath, let me ask you this, because the thing that I've been so concerned about is Facebook just announcing that you're going to be having some app that you can use when you're 7 to 13. I mean, it's one thing for us to be doing this, but to be hooking your kids on something that you're describing as a dopamine fix at that age, that's crazy.
So look, I think in the case of Facebook specifically, I think they have probably done more than any other company, quite honestly, to try to fix it, because of all of the companies, and I've seen them all up close, they're the most, frankly, to be very blunt and honest, the best run and the most technically sophisticated.
But they're also emailing me if I haven't logged onto Facebook for a while, saying, hey, did you see the post from so-and-so? Did you see the post from so-and-so? Trying to lure you back in. And again, we can make those decisions as adults, but as children, that is a different...
Well, I think the product, and I don't know it quite honestly in as much detail as I should, but I think the way that product works, because of privacy laws in the United States, you actually have to get parental permission. The point, though, is, and what you're bringing up is, I think, is the most important thing. We all have never taken a step back and actually asked ourselves, how should we be interacting with these things now, 7 years into it? And what should we be expecting of the internet at large? Look, the reality may be the entire business model of the internet may be fundamentally somewhat broken, right? Because we allow ourselves to get interacted with in ways where we don't necessarily control the medium or the messenger.
And we are not putting up any barriers to ever give yourself any downtime from that either.
Exactly. And so it may mean that we all collectively need to figure out, not just individuals, but also the companies, also governments, quite honestly, how different business models need to exist so that we can actually divorce ourselves from how this stuff is
what
working.
goes on in the Palihapitiya household?
There's no screen time whatsoever.
None.
None.
So forget about. Let's not even talk. Your Facebook is not just off limits. You're talking no iPads.
None.
None. How old are
Now
the
that's
kids?
it. I have 3, 8, 9, 7, and 5.
And do they ask?
Oh, all the time, because their friends have it all the time.
Movies?
A little bit if we have to.
But no computers at all.
You know, here's the life that I live with my children, which may not be for everyone. I said I don't like this codependency of they need to rely on me, and when they can't, I feed them a device because that becomes a babysitter. You go figure it out. Go outside, skin your knee, fall on the ground, play a sport, lose at something, and then come back to me and we can talk about it. And we'll talk about it as rational human beings, and I'll try to tell you why that's a good thing that just happened to you. Versus, here you are, I'm in a baby because I have something else to do. And so we've made these conscious choices. I've made these conscious choices, but they're conscious. And what I was trying to get across, and I could have done it more articulately, is it needs to be more of a conscious choice. I'll give you a different example. Adam Bain, who you know and love, he and I go to the Knicks game. And you would think that it's amazing. We're sitting courtside, it's fantastic. I took a picture, he took a picture. We sweated the filter for 15 minutes trying to figure out which photo. And I thought, if Adam Bain and I are stuck trying to figure out what photo filter we're going to use because we're so craving the reaction, what must everybody else be going through? And aren't other people feeling this void that I'm feeling in this moment? So I try to articulate a sensation.
In the meantime, you're not watching the game. You're not paying attention to what's going on.
It's just a really weird place. So I was just trying to articulate
What kind of reaction? Does Mark Zuckerberg call you? Who calls you in the Valley after you make a comment like this?
Let's just say a lot of people called and texted. Here's what I would say. I owe those guys everything. They made me. I mean, I'm sitting in this seat because, frankly, I was able to be a part of a company that did something really wonderful, and they're gonna do more to fix this stuff than anybody else. So I feel bad that guys there may feel like I didn't do right by them in what I said, but it was not directed at Facebook. I was really just trying to talk about something societally, and I agree with you, Joe. I'm not gonna backtrack on what I said because at some core basic level, we have to start talking about this stuff. How should our kids? Why is anxiety and depression amongst our teenagers higher than they've ever been?
Yes, it's a
in a
huge,
world
huge
that
issue.
is safer, in a world that's more constructive, in a world where you should have access to everything, what is going on? And we just have to figure this out and talk about it.
When will you let your 9-year-old actually have a screen?
He can get a job. I worked at Burger King when I was 14. When he gets a job and earns enough money to buy his phone, he can do whatever he wants with it. Up until then, I'm going to feed him, clothe him, and house him, and send him to school, and that's all I'm going to do.
I mean, I feel you yourself don't feel the urge to always check your a screen, or you do?
I check my screen a lot at the office.
He's
Not
got the
at home.
phone right there.
And
I know, but what
even
about
now,
at home?
I've actually morphed my behavior. What I do now is, like, whenever I even come into the office, typically, I actually put it face down. Because otherwise I feel all these notifications. I'm constantly, my email notifications, stock alerts, etc.
Well, you can turn those off. I don't have those on.
This is a pervasive trend that's...
But I feel it. And I remember the other day where I forgot my phone and I was in a line somewhere. And it was a signal from my unconscious just about every 2 minutes that I felt. It was like...
By the way, do you ever feel the panic phantom pain of wherever you keep your phone?
Yep.
Or where you feel like maybe a text just... Yeah.
So this is clearly
And for
something
kids,
that's
that's
new.
even-
Have you talked to Sean Parker about this? Because he
I
made
haven't
some
talked to
comments
Parker.
that were similar just 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Well, this is why I thought, what I said a month ago really, it was me kind of just saying what at the time I was thinking through, and then it was a month later. Now this whole thing has kind of gone crazy.
You know what? It probably is chemically mediated. I mean, in my brain. That,
I mean,
whatever gets me to all of a sudden feel that need to do something is
It's true for video games. It's true for television. Right. It's true for other forms of. It's true for music. So it's probably true for your phone.
Right. We're going to be spending a lot more time with you, but I do want to just get to one other topic because we talk about it every day. Bitcoin.
It is out of control. Like, look, let's
talk Bitcoin?
Let's talk Bitcoin. 2012, I was introduced to it. I started to accumulate. 2013, I wrote an article. And
so hold on, just so we know and can feel bad about ourselves, you're accumulating it at what price?
Well, my dollar cost average is around 100 and something.
And you've held it, everything you've bought?
Well, at one point, myself and so I was introduced to it by a person. I asked him if I could disclose his name. He said no. But he, myself, and another person, all three of us relatively well known in the Valley, we started. At one point, we owned almost 5% of the entire float in 2013. We've sold, they've sold, et cetera, et cetera. I wish we had kept it all. We didn't. It's fine. But then I wrote an article, and I said, you know what? There's so much asymmetric upside here. This is a thing that either goes to, at the time I said, roughly the value of gold. And at the time, it was about $100 a coin. And so there's very little downside. There's all this asymmetric upside. I said, take 1% of your net worth and buy this schmuck insurance. And it's a schmuck insurance in this kind of very elegant, beautiful way.
I missed the schmuck insurance.
That was at $100, though. What would I actually started hearing from people that I know very well who don't often invest, who are now asking me if this is the time to invest.
Buy the schmuck insurance now.
Here's the thing. This is now a confidence game, right? There is no real utility in this. This is a fantastic, fundamental hedge and store of value against autocratic regimes and banking infrastructure that we know is corrosive to how the world needs to work properly. You cannot have central banks infinitely printing currency. You cannot have folks with, misguided and misdirected monetary and fiscal policy.
We've done okay.
You just called it a confidence game, which is a con game.
And we've done okay. The economy is built on central banks and built on fiat currencies, where you said yourself how much better life is in every respect than it's ever been, and that's with that as a infrastructure.
So we've seen the first few chapters of this, and now we have to go through this great unwind, right? When all this liquidity now, what happens?
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. And so all I'm saying is to have the ability to hedge that out in a way that isn't fundamentally correlated to the people and the infrastructure that made those decisions that we were not a part of fundamentally, I think is a smart thing.
But the point is, if you haven't jumped on this bus or train or whatever vehicle you want to describe it as, has it left the station?
No. So here's what I would say. The same way that I said in 2013, put 1% of your net worth into Bitcoin, I will put myself out there today. I think this thing is $100,000 a coin, probably in the next 3 to 4 years. And I think it is, in the next 20 years, $1 million a coin. So there you have it.
You're telling people to put 1% of your net worth
at the time.
That's for.
It's a lot harder.
But that's for people who have money to play with. I mean, if you're talking to an average retail investor who's looking at this, somebody who's trying to figure out, should I put it in my 401k or should I put it in Bitcoin, you would tell them what?
Well, I don't think that's the actual trade-off. In your 401k, so for example, in your IRA,
I'm saying that there are people who have to make decisions about these things who aren't fully invested in their 401k.
So what I'm saying is I own a lot of Bitcoin in my IRA. It is possible. So I did take a small percentage and I put it in there. All I'm saying is there's a small percentage of everyone's net worth. God bless him to do it in the most
tax-advantaged way.
Absolutely.
But you have money to play with.
No, but what I'm saying is you could buy the S&P 500 index, buy 99% of that. So if you have $100 to invest, what I'm saying is...
Put $1.
Put $1. And the reason that $1 is so valuable is that it is fundamentally not correlated to the other 99. And just on the off chance that all the people that manage the 99 may not totally know what they're doing, the $1 may actually save us all.
Okay. We are going to be spending a lot more time with you and talking to you on so many other topics as well, and I'm sure we'll come back to Bitcoin too, so thank you.
Thank you.
All of your Fed worship, we found out today, has been misplaced because Chamath, our guest host, says you should sell, based on the Fed's and other central bankers' unbelievable missteps, you should sell everything and buy Bitcoin.
Because it's been so bad so far.
That's what I
Right?
said. That the world
Right?
is.
I mean, the dollar crashed like all the Fed critics thought it was going to happen, and inflation
Well, I might have started something
surged
between you.
like all these
I passed it off now.
If the past was an absolute perfect judge of the future, we'd be all set.
You didn't, Chamath. I totally. I
that's
set up a
fine.
straw man. You didn't say sell everything and put it in Bitcoin.
I actually didn't say that.
He didn't say
I
that.
said
But
take
what
1%.
Chamath did say
But
was,
I'm still willing to argue with him for whatever he said.
I know you are. You're always ready. But if there's just slightest chance that these guys are somewhat conflicted or clueless or not, or have different irons in the fire for the way they manage currency, you should have something that isn't affected by all that. That's not correlated with what central banker is. Have I got that right?
I think that's basically right. I think you have to basically have a what if the sky falls strategy in any time.
And the unwind is something you're worried about.
The unwind, let's face
We
it.
don't know what Bitcoin correlates or doesn't correlate with, right? Let's go back to 2008 when we thought there were differences in correlations in asset values, and what we found out in 2008 was, as Jackson Brown sang, in the fury of the final hour, that it's a great line. It's a great line. It really describes the financial crisis. In any event, when that happened, all correlations went to 1, right? So we don't know what Bitcoin's correlations really are.
When I mean correlation, what I'm talking about is, at the end of the day, this is a string of letters and numbers that was generated on a computer that sits in a secure wallet. It truly is, in the functional utility of the world, uncorrelated to anything. It is an idea, and it is a belief system, and that may scare people.
Here's a question.
But that's really what it is.
Its correlation is determined by those who hold it, though, relative to their other assets.
Do you have any anxiety that its current rise is correlated to a market bubble, meaning that it reflects that there's just too much money sloshing around, and people have so much money that they're looking for these sort of any opportunity in a way that they might not have 2 and 3 and 4 years ago?
I think bubbles happen when there's a scale of importance. And I think it's very unfair to look at a market that's still measured in the few tens of billions of dollars and call it A, a market to begin with, and then B, that there's a speculative bubble. Maybe that can happen from time to time at such small scale. I think what's more likely is that there's just an overwhelming number of people who literally don't even know what Bitcoin is.
Right.
And then there's a very, very small number of people who are at the periphery, looky-looing, having opinions, but have never even bothered to read the definitions.
That's a good phrase.
Have never bothered to open in a wallet, have never bothered to even read the Wikipedia article, but they want to correlate it to a framework they understand because it's safe. And what I would say is, I would suspend disbelief, which is what I did in 2012. It took me 18 months to understand. And I'm reasonably technical. And so what I would say is, other people, if they took the time, may come to a very different conclusion than what is the obvious negative Nelly conclusion.
I think it would be really elegant if the bubble itself helped create the answer to what caused the bubble. In other words, the central bank
Bubble.
I completely agree with you.
That would be a real, in the way the universe works, that would be interesting.
Because then you'd really see whether the emperor had clothes or did not.
See, there is a bubble from all the money sloshing around.
That's the real bubble.
Bitcoin is the answer to the profligate moves.
Hold on. I thought the market was up on the Trump economy.
I'm not necessarily talking about just...
Hold on. You can't have it both ways. It can't be a bubble if it's the Trump economy with fundamentals underneath it. I'm just giving you a hard time, Joe, because...
Talking more about a bond bubble.
Bond bubble, but also, this is an unusual time where all assets seem to be inflated to a higher degree. And the question is whether or not the Fed has inflated this. When you look at what's happened to the money supply, a lot of this extra liquidity in bank or excess reserves has not been converted or created into either loans or money, Joe. So the idea that somehow there is this froth or bubble in the system from the Fed is a little bit negated by the idea that it's not been turned into money.
It's the bond bubble. The stock market, I would say, on a price to earnings basis is not in bubble territory.
Can I just?
Do you think the stock market's in? I don't think.
I don't know. I don't think about the stock market. But let me just.
I don't think so.
It's the underlying earnings that this is based on.
The Fed is reducing its balance sheet, and it has plans to reduce its balance sheet. You would think that in that case, the market would price in the forward plans of the Federal Reserve in that time period. Long paper has declined in yield.
That's because it's a global bond market now. There's central bankers headed the
or maybe there's tremendous underlying demand for long-dated risk assets, and it's not a bubble.
I mean, at the yields in which they offer, I just don't think that really is true.
But people are going out every day and buying in this market, not at gunpoint from the government, right? You could almost make an argument that we have a deficit of long-dated paper that the market desires.
That's because in Japan you get 50 cents a year on $1,000.
Whatever the reason, private hands are going in, and they're buying this stuff, and they're holding on to it.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Let's get back to our guest host, Chamath Palihapitiya. He is Social Capital founder, also Golden State Warriors co-owner. And Chamath, the last time you were with us, you said something that got us thinking, that Amazon was a monopoly. Now, I know you didn't mean it the same way, but we just heard last week that Lee Cooperman said he was having dinner with President Trump, and he asked him twice if Amazon was a monopoly.
Yeah, let me talk to you about what I was trying to say there, which is it is what I think about as a natural product monopoly. What does that mean? You build something, and when it starts to work, what happens is the usage tells you what the trail of breadcrumbs is you should follow. So what Amazon has done elegantly is they've built a product that has such fantastic product market fit. They watch how people use it, and then they actually use that to distill what to do next. And what to do next becomes slightly easier and easier every turn and every time they do it. And so what you have, for example, this year, if anybody went to Amazon reInvent, which is their annual developer conference, 50, 60 odd thousand people flooded into Las Vegas. They overflowed multiple casinos, multiple grand ballrooms in order to even so you flew there just to watch it remote. And what you saw were tens upon tens upon tens of critical features that they had done in a year. And when you take a step back and say, wait a minute, the totality of what they did is unbelievable. And then you think they did that in a year? And then they did that at a velocity that you could imagine, at a scale and an impact? And then you think to yourself, well, what is next year going to look like? And by the way, the things that they did probably wiped out about $2 billion of equity value of VCs putting money into ideas that frankly made no sense in the first place.
Because they jumped ahead of all of it.
They tried to jump ahead and not really think through the implications of an Amazon. And so that to me is what I think about as a natural product monopoly. It is a thing that now compounds every day slightly a little bit faster than the day before. It's by no means a market monopoly, because there are other alternatives. There's Google, there's Microsoft, in China you have Alibaba and Tencent, et cetera. But it is a thing now that, in my opinion, just continues to run. And every year gets a little bit cheaper, gets a little bit more complete, and more things are available to you. It's an incredible thing.
The president comes from a place of populism, and his idea on the campaign trail and now even in office has been that sometimes big is just too big, and we can't allow that much power in the hands of a select group of people. And that's not just Amazon, but that's all of Silicon Valley that could be targeted as a result.
I mean, when you think about Amazon, they employ now, I think, more than 500,000 people. Mm-hmm. They employ, frankly, more vets than some of these companies have employees. They are doing all the right things, I think. They are about to open a second headquarters. I suspect you'll see it in a, red or purple state. Texas, maybe Michigan. And so on every dimension, they are, from a corporate responsibility perspective, acting well.
But again, I'm shifting from just Amazon to saying Facebook, Google, all of the tech darlings that for so long were kind of given carte blanche and we said we need to help them build up because, I mean, I remember covering the internet back in 1999, and there was not going to be the internet tax on any of these things because we wanted these companies to flourish.
We made a claim, and I think that it worked for a very long time, that we are different, and as a result, we can self-regulate. And I think people are waking up to a world that is slightly different from that, which is, hey, wait a minute, we shouldn't have special exceptions. We should probably treat all kinds of businesses the same, independent of how you do it. And in that, there is probably more governmental involvement than less over time in all of these industries and in all of these businesses. And I think we should just rationalize it, be prepared for it. And also, we should take a step back and say, what is the other responsible thing? Joe talked about the inequity. Should we not maybe do things in a slightly different way? It may mean 2, 3, 4, 5% impact to earnings. Is that okay? And what I would tell you is, when you have business models that generate 60, 70, 80% profits, yeah, it is okay. It is okay to actually only make 55% versus 60% and have 25,000 more employees. It's okay.
Well, particularly if you're trying to stave off regulation that could strangle some of that anyway.
Or frankly, you actually, if you want to displace the actual inequity that you viscerally feel is a problem in the first place. So tech companies have this mechanism and a capability to do a broad set of things, to employ people fully, to pay them well, to give them benefits, to do that all over the world. It doesn't always have to be cheaper, faster, better.
It's easy to say that, though. Can you imagine trying to deliver that message to shareholders? We've seen it with Walmart.
You know,
they've actually come out and said they were going to pay higher than minimum wage.
You know, when I set up social capital, I took a step back and I said, how do I want to define what success looks like? There's progress, there's impact. And one of the things that we said is we want our businesses by 2045 to be employing 10 million people. And the reason we said that was that is the tip of the spear that says, hey, some different kind of full employment is going to be necessary. It's not all about making money. It's not all about doing it in the simplest way and impacting the most people. It's also by pulling through people.
So, okay, but come back to Amazon for just a second. If Jeff Bezos were sitting at this table with us right now, he would say progress is getting the package to you quicker, for cheaper, and frankly, if we could avoid human beings actually having to lift the boxes, go through the street, that those are the kinds of jobs that we actually we'd love to upgrade them to do something else, that is progress. Do you agree with that? And I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth, but he's talked about this idea of what progress looks like and that you don't necessarily want people doing certain types of jobs that frankly would want to get away from.
So I think Warren Buffett has actually had the most clarifying thoughts on this, which is when he contrasts, you know, America in 1917 versus America in 2017, and you think about the agrarian economy we lived in, and then the advent of the tractor and what that did. It wasn't that the inventor of the tractor all of a sudden said, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to basically be your salvation. It was the government, it was the social infrastructure, it was a path to education, it was a path to a GI Bill, it was all of these other things that allowed people to reclaim a sense of self and a sense of identity in doing a different thing. And so I think I agree with the first two things that probably Jeff would say. I'm not sure that he would say the third thing, but I do think that he and CEOs like him who are thoughtful and honorable will go out of their way to be slightly less efficient for the sake of bringing more people along. And I think that is the right thing to do. He employs more people than any other tech company.
Right, but part of what he would say is by doing it cheaper, by doing it faster, since that's the spear. If you do it that way, then you're going to be more successful, so you can employ more people.
In one hand, and on the other hand, you're finding different ways of creating different kinds of jobs that do all of the things that you need to do.
Chamath is our guest host. He'll be with us for the rest of the program.
Our guest host this morning, Chamath Palihapitiya, is the founder of Social Capital. Never one to hold back, so let's not. You mentioned at the top of this hour that you had some short ideas, some things that maybe you're not going long on, you're betting against.
You know, so I mean, in our public equities business, what we do is we alpha short. So we don't short to hedge because we don't really charge fees. We just make profits on the back end. And so we always look at companies and say, are there companies that are just fundamentally either misguided or misallocating capital? Or have they just gotten over their ski tips, or are they just fundamentally misunderstood? And one of the best spaces where I think you can find some really interesting companies is in sort of this machine learning AI. Now, you have to take a longer term view, but there is just so much activity happening at Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, amongst what are called, technically, these companies are called hyperscalers. In China, at Baidu and Tencent, where everybody is rolling their own chips.
Right.
Then you have companies like Grok, which we can talk about in a second, which is just an absolute revolutionary approach to chip design, an order of magnitude improvement to all of that stuff. And so what you're seeing is an expansion of a market. You're going into a multi-vendor environment, right? But today there's only one vendor, and that vendor is in NVIDIA, and then that stock is now a $200 stock. It's a $120 billion market cap, a fantastic company. And you have to ask oneself, what has happened to Intel when all of these big monolithic companies get into the game is you crush margin, you crush vendor diversity, and things get very difficult. What happens in the world of machine learning and artificial intelligence? And I suspect that will happen. And so it's one of these areas that while we, as an organization, are baking some really interesting private companies, we're looking at the public markets and kind of scratching our heads and asking ourselves, this entire ecosystem.
Okay, so
may be
let's
a little
put
ahead of their
up. Can we
ski
put
tips.
up NVIDIA on the screen? I mean, this has been one of the great darlings
Oh, absolutely.
of the stock market over
Absolutely.
the past, say, 24 months. It's just been on a rocket ship of a ride. You're
Absolutely.
looking at it right there. What do you think it's worth in reality then?
I think you have to ask yourself, in 3 to 4 years, when AI really hits its scale, how are the tasks done and where is the task running in terms of the hardware? And what we know is that it will never be a single vendor environment in 3 to 4 years. We know that conclusively. And we also know that these big companies need to own AI as fully as possible. We've seen it play out at Google. They own their own chips called TPU. They're building these FPGAs.
Right.
You know, Amazon just released the ability to access that at the raw bare metal level. What do you think these companies are going to do? They're not going to go over and say, hey, just sell it to me at whatever margin you like.
You have the same. How do you think of the other chip makers? And I'm thinking, by the way, Broadcom,
Sure.
Qualcomm,
Yeah, great
in the
question.
news right now,
Great question. So
given the merger proposal.
This is all trending to commodity. So in the absence of some fundamental technical innovation and leap, I think what we're going to see is a flattened market. It's going to be thin margins. It's going to be high velocity, high volume. And so you have to sort of plan that into what your business model looks like. And the problem is the existing incumbents, I
So
don't
you
think
short
are
the
well
whole
prepared.
space?
What I would do, quite honestly, and this is what I will do, is once we land the next major technical release of our chip, once I know what the performance characteristics look like, which we know is an order of magnitude better than anything else, then I know that that product is going to work.
What do you think about Intel and Brian Krzanich? Because they bought Mobileye. They're trying to pursue sort of a big data strategy of collecting all of this stuff from the cloud. You're smiling and laughing. I think we're going to get a comment like the way you did about Watson at IBM in about a moment.
You know, I have a lot of friends at IBM, and I have a lot of friends at Intel, so I will not say what I said there, but here's what I will say. Intel is going through what I think everybody else will go through, which is you have a processor. It kind of works. It's kind of semi-useful. And then all of a sudden, these big guys get you into a room and say, I'm Amazon. I have this much demand. I have Google. I have this much demand. I have Facebook. I'm Tencent. I'm Baba. Here's the price I'm willing to pay. Choose or don't choose. And if you don't choose, I'm going to go and spin up ARM, or I'm going to go roll my own. And you've seen how that plays out. Massive amounts of capacity, massive amounts of capability that Intel can't actually deploy. They, over time, will become a contract manufacturer for others. They will look like Foxconn for others. That is not a great business from where they are. And so this is a 15 to 20-year trend that is going to play out for them. But they are the canary in the coal mine for how other folks, in the absence of something truly revolutionary technically, that's the path that everyone else will go down.
Why can't they just hire the R&D guys to come up with new things, with new innovations? Are you saying there is
I
no
think
more?
that is
Is it Moore's law that there is no more innovation to come?
No, it's that when these innovations get baked now, there are folks like us, a vibrant ecosystem of investors who can get behind them and fund them to completion. You know, I have billions of dollars that I can deploy behind Grok to make sure that they are a vibrant, long-living public business.
So
And
explain to me how Amazon and all these guys aren't monopolies if they can then determine whether an Intel, a Dow component, can actually compete and survive. If you say, I'm so big that you're going to either work with me or I'm going to take my business elsewhere and crush you.
Because it's one of many businesses that Intel is in. My point is, you're taking the most high-value business and you're going to erode margins there, which means that, will they be profitable? Sure. Will they be large? Sure. But it's not going to be where they are, and so this company will get re-rated. NVIDIA will get re-rated. It is just a thing that'll happen. So we're debating market cap. I don't think we're debating viability.
Okay, different company, Tesla. Where do you land right now?
We are massively long the convertible bonds. Why the convertible bonds? Again, it's the safest and the surest way to basically bet on Elon Musk, who I just fundamentally think is the most important entrepreneur of our generation.
But you don't like the equity. You don't like the stock.
The equity represents tremendous volatility. I mean, if you put it on the screen, you can see it right there. And for our risk management, for the way that I want my capital and my partner's capital run, what I want is a mechanism to get 95% of the upside, 0 of the downside. And literally the bonds give you that. And so, you know, there's no need for me to sort of step out there, try to be a risk cowboy to prove something that we don't have to prove, because Elon has said to the entire world, hey, listen, you can buy the naked equity, or take this other thing, which gives you 95% of it and no downside.
What's a coupon?
When we bought it, it was yielding 5%.
What's it now?
Now it's close to zero.
Well, what's the premium over conversion?
No, we bought it at like 87 cents.
Would you still buy it at close to zero?
Yeah, because you get the downside protection.
Separate question. If he was willing to sell you a piece of the boring company, this is the tunneling company, which may be boring to some people, but I think it's pretty exciting.
I think it's really exciting.
You'd buy it?
Hey, look, here's the thing.
Would you buy?
This is what, absolutely. Here's the thing with this guy. I've known him for a long time. He is truly putting every single dollar where his mouth is. The guy is trying to make us an interplanetary species, get us off of oil, reduce traffic. And this is where I don't understand when people like Chanos come out and say, you know what, this company is a fraud, I don't understand what he's talking about. There's nothing fraudulent about this guy. There's nothing fraudulent about the technology. This is just like people wanting to dance on failure, and I just don't get it.
Can they call that? Is there a call provision for the converts?
We own the ability to convert at a certain convert price.
Can he call it he can't.
He cannot.
Because there'd be a force. You'd have to.
Yeah.
You could force it. Really? You sure? There's no.
Yeah, no, Joe.
There's no call.
It's an amazing instrument. It's an amazing instrument.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
We happen to both be in agreement about Elon Musk. However,
Yeah.
Over time, every time he's put out some type of expectation about sales of those vehicles, they rarely, if ever, hit them. In fact, they seem to disappoint routinely. So I think when part of the Chanos story is he puts out these grand projections, oftentimes raises money on the back of them, and then doesn't hit the number.
Here's what
right?
Jim Chanos and everybody else needs to appreciate. Building revolutionary things is hard, okay? You don't just walk in and invent the iPhone. There's complexity there. You don't just come in and invent Facebook. There's tremendous complexity. And so you got to think about this in years. And even though we force companies like that to boil them down to quarters, it doesn't work.
And Chamath, we haven't gotten a chance to talk to you about your role as an NBA owner. Yesterday, Roger Goodell was here on the set talking about the kneeling controversy, what that has meant for football. And as an NBA owner, what's your take? How should teams approach this? How should the league approach it?
Can I, before I answer that as an owner, can I answer it as a colored man?
Sure.
I've gotten pulled over by the police, just driving. I don't think it's their fault. I think it's sort of just the part of the milieu we live in. I've gotten on planes where I know that people feel uncomfortable because their initial reaction is, oh, there's a kind of brown bearded guy on the plane. I felt that. And so what I think that is worth realizing is that all different kinds of people can feel different versions of those things in the natural course of life. And when some of those people want to reflect that and then have a dialogue about it, I think the first thing you have to do is, quite honestly, take a step back and say, where are they coming from? And then, is this the right place and how should it happen? What I can tell you is that I think as an owner, I think Adam Silver has done an unbelievable job. I think the players in the NBA are incredible because they have a point of view. They believe, and I agree with them, they've earned the right to be able to start a conversation, see what LeBron does, Chris Paul does, Steph. And I just wish that the NFL kind of embraced it in a little bit of a different way. The reality is, you're putting 52 men on the field, wrapped in metal to bang each other up, and then to monetize that in a 50-odd, 100-odd, whatever billion-dollar enterprise. Those are a key part of the system, and if they want to reflect some frustrations that exist, these are true things that exist in the world, you have to enable a discussion, and that frustrates me just as a man. And as an owner, I would just say that I'm just really glad that I'm part of an organization that has enabled a very different kind of conversation.
To be fair, the NBA has the benefit of going second. They got to see what the NFL kind of stumbled through along the way.
I also think Adam, as a person, though, is just a really empathetic, smart guy.
The way of doing it, where you say the players have earned a right to express their feelings and let their voice be heard, is there a way to do that and not politicize it, to have it in a position where you're going to potentially alienate some of your fan base, too, to say maybe not during the national anthem?
Yeah, there probably is. And I think if they had kind of gotten everybody together much sooner, then it wouldn't have become such a divisive, polarizing issue. Because then everybody then, again, in the modern world we live in, is forced to go to their corner, and now there is just absolutely no backtracking. Nobody can backtrack. The owners can't backtrack in the NFL. The players can't backtrack in the NFL. Then you have these weird mixture of like, oh, well, let's compromise by only doing it in the, in the
Or not showing up, staying in the locker room in between.
So this is all part and parcel of even how we started talking in the morning. It's just this is the kind of stuff where in a different era, we would have just figured it out in a different way. And it's not set up well for that right now.
We asked Roger Goodell yesterday about Colin Kaepernick, someone who used to play on a team where you
in San Francisco,
exactly. Yeah. And we asked him straight up, do you think he's being blackballed by the owners? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, isn't it obvious? I mean, the guy went from a very, very legitimate player to probably a pretty legitimate backup to he cannot get a job.
Although, is that necessarily blackballing, or is it every owner saying, wait a second, I don't want to bring the controversy into my house?
Yeah, you're right. It may not be as organized. There may not be a WhatsApp group where they're organizing how to do this. I get that. But the outcome is the same, which is a legitimate human being who has credible athletic ability, who at one point was probably a top 3 or 4 QB at some point in the league, who probably has a functional role to play, can never get that job again. It's pretty clear. And so it's an unfortunate
Do you think there's an
situation.
owner, potentially even next season, who would take a chance on him right now?
I'm not sure. I don't know. And to be quite honest with you, football, quite honestly, I haven't watched it in 4 years. It's just so past the. I just can't look at these guys beating themselves up. The sport frustrates me. It's slow, quite honestly. I love basketball. It's incredible. The teams are amazing. The people are amazing. They're well run. Long live the NBA.
All right, Chamath is our guest host. He's going to be with us for the rest of the hour.
He lives in San Francisco. It's been a tough year to watch the 49ers, too.
I mean, oh my gosh.
I'm from Cincinnati.
Chad is trying his best, but oh my
I'm from
gosh.
Cincinnati, so, I mean.
Oh my gosh.
Feel the pain?
Wow.
There's a lot of oh my goshing.
Apple. What'd you say about Apple? You said Apple is no longer a tech company, but then you changed that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think what it is sort of like it's in this migration to being a really interesting software business and a luxury good business. And it's trying to figure out how to navigate that and how to manage the brand and how to manage, how to sell $1,000 devices that have certain capabilities. But when you take a step back and actually look at that phone and compare it to a Pixel or the next generation Samsung, what you see is frankly the same product. And so what it has is brand. It has a sense of differentiation. And that's no different than Louis Vuitton or any other luxury good that you're willing to pay a premium for that may not really bear the cost of it if you look at the actual raw materials that go into it. And so they're going to have to make a really interesting transition because they're going to have to figure out how to land more of these iPhone 10s where, people like us are willing to pay $1,000, but what does that leave behind? And I think what it leaves behind is a market that's going to get consolidated even more by folks like Xiaomi or Samsung on the low end.
So it's $1 trillion company, probably.
It definitely bleeds into that category because now you're just talking about, another 12 or 15% accretion from where they are. But, the question has always been, what do you do with all this money? What do you do with this scale? And especially
in Ireland, I think, too.
Unfortunately, so far, that's all they've done. And if you repatriate it, what should they be buying, if anything? I mean, I still think Tesla, Netflix, these are the businesses that Apple should be in the business of owning, just because it has so much operational leverage for them.
Do you think they will? Meaning once the tax policy shifts?
No. I think that they have funded, look, I mean, they've spent more on their building, quite honestly, than they have in any sort of major feature or product launch. So this is
talking that it's something between $1 billion and $5 billion.
I think it was a $10 billion campus or something. I mean, look, the point, they probably spent more to figure out how to curve the glass than, So they're at a point in time where I think they're being stewards. They need a generational transition where now people that are a little bit further divorced from the Steve Jobs legacy can take over those businesses. And then you'll either see it flounder or just completely go nuclear in a rocket ship. And we need that moment to come at some point.
How do you judge Tim Cook's leadership then?
Oh, I think he's been a great steward. But I think he's operated, like I said, again, as an outsider just looking at it, as not wanting to push the envelope too much by accidentally denigrating Steve's legacy.
But what do you look at?
Probably the right thing to do in that situation.
Yeah, and frankly, you look at Microsoft, it's roughly the same thing where Ballmer tried the best he could, now slightly different circumstances, obviously, and then you needed a transition to someone like Satya.
I think that Tim Cook would say,
business.
look at the stock price, look at the market share, look at the revenue produced over the last.
None of those things I take away. What I'm saying is, has there been visionary product leadership. And I think what instead they've done is they've managed a business well that has been given to them.
Chamath, love having you here. Thank you
Thanks,
very
guys.
much.
Great to see you.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to